Hanna-Barbera is one of the most important conglomerates in the animation industry, and I'm not about to mince words. I think a lot of what they do is garbage. I know that's probably a pretty ignorant statement, and their impact, despite any levels of quality, can't be questioned. In fact, I'd be hard-pressed to criticize the likes of Wacky Races and Scooby-Doo. That said, considering the downright monstrous number of properties they've made, they're not all going to be winners, and their historic status and occasional infamy for their frugal methods of animation is hard to remiss as well. If there's one thing about Hanna-Barbera's slew of IPs that's remained, I'd say it's the characters more than their stories, which is why many creators and companies have wanted to put their own spin on their ensemble. If my channel recently has been any indicator, I love a good cast of anthropomorphic animals, and this is no exception. The likes of Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, and Squidly Diddly, often remembered for their infectious voices and colorful designs, and many have found them ripe for wild adaptation, including DC Comics and their surprisingly excellent line of stories, Hanna-Barbera Beyond. Authors were given a chance to put harrowing and creative twists on Hanna-Barbera characters, including Scooby Apocalypse, Wacky Raceland, and the thunderously received Flintstones, which deals with marriage equality, PTSD, and American consumerism, in a matter that set the world of comics on fire for a hot second. So I think Undersung is the comic based on my personal favorite Hanna-Barbera character, Snagglepuss.
Ta-ra-ra-boom-de-ay, ta-ra-ra-boom-de-ay.
Despite my criticisms of Hanna-Barbera's more vacuous cartoons, Snagglepuss would be who I call my personal favorite. His splash of pink is straightforward but effective, and his verbose speech patterns and theatrical inclinations are all traits I'm drawn to.
Right over there, under your nose even.
Snagglepuss's memorable line delivery was based on Bert Lahr, specifically his performance as the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz. Daws Butler's impression of the iconic character lent Snagglepuss a distinct charm that permeates, like many Hanna-Barbera characters to this day. Though there's a big thing about Snagglepuss that to a modern audience definitely stands out as odd. Snagglepuss is a bright pink, well-groomed, erudite, and theatrical lion with a female love interest. Oh, okay. So to be clear, queer coding and assumption of sexuality surrounding that is altogether a super loaded topic, and I might not be the person to really weigh in on this, but I'm not blind either, and I, among other contemporary consumers, can read between the lines.
Well, you being a homosexual lion.
I wasn't talking about me. I'm as straight as a line. A chorus line, even.
Snagglepuss was a product of the 60s for children's TV. Of course, he wasn't going to be canonically gay. That said, the writing was on the wall, and just about everyone ran with it when concurrently adapting Snagglepuss, for better or worse.
Oh, you are not gonna believe what Wonder Woman wore into work today.
Not the two-piece. Not the two-piece.
With the boots, even.
I think the biggest thing to acknowledge is the fact that he's based on Bert Lahr's portrayal of the Cowardly Lion, another queer-coded character from a film that became a hallmark of the gay community. Maybe it's suffering through an entire generation fed the lie that Sailor Neptune and Uranus are cousins, but I always felt something about Snagglepuss was being stifled, and that notion was answered by Hanna-Barbera Beyond's Exit Stage Left, the Snagglepuss Chronicles. In this story, Snagglepuss is placed during the Red Scare of the 1950s. He's a playwright to the effect of Tennessee Williams, a disposition wherein he's constantly pressured to oust his peers as potential communists, endure the scrutiny of his art, and keep up a public image via a lavender marriage to Lila Lyon, his very same love interest from the old cartoons. Snagglepuss's real lover is a young man named Pablo, and he and Huckleberry Hound are both under constant fear of having their homosexuality exposed to the public. A number of xenophobic factors caused witch hunts for the homosexual community to be handled hand in hand with those for communist spies, and as one can guess, the industries of art and film contained a largely overlapping Venn diagram for figures who would be accused of both. What makes this setup so cathartic to me is the fact that you can read it in a meta way that, yes, as many viewers have figured over the years, Snagglepuss's feelings for Lila are just a cover, and now that we're out of the 50s, he can live his truth. both narratively as a character handled by creators who wish to interpret him as a vehicle for gay stories. Placing him within the Lavender Scare is a brilliant choice because Snagglepuss as a character lives in an era where cartoon characters were smoothed of their rougher edges for exactly the reason playwrights and Hollywood stars had to hide who they were. Snagglepuss within Exit Stage Left makes cutting comments on TV, claiming it's all two-dimensional and that he prefers a medium such as theater where one can embrace reality, which a reader could translate as him throwing away his TV persona from his cartoon iteration and embracing a more nuanced lifestyle. With all of that in mind, the Snagglepuss Chronicles sounds pretty harrowing, and it often is. But I think the charm of the story is how shrewdly the writers keep Snagglepuss in character. When he's being questioned by witch hunters or trying to wrap his head around the existential horror of the parasocial illusion of fame, he's written with the same wit and vernacular that his cartoon self had. And while the sophisticated playwright Snagglepuss is often more dignified than his cartoon counterpart, he's still prone to his predecessor's put-upon bewilderment, including scenes where other characters are baffled he's ever tried to hide his homosexuality, because it's plainly obvious to them, much to his embarrassment. Snagglepuss, who has to live in duplicitousness, gets an opportunity to explore how everyone in show business around him has to do the same. From the tender conversation he shares with Marilyn Monroe, who's tired of presenting herself as a sex symbol, to the grim execution of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, reaching and chilling him. All of this is presented by some breathtaking art, as the glum yet proudly performative tones Snagglepuss wades in are punctuated by pieces that speak to the melancholy artist and lover of the city this particular reader considers himself. The story has a bittersweet ending where Snagglepuss is brought into cartoon production by Quick Draw McGraw, years after he's been blacklisted for refusing to oust other communists. We assume in a meta sense that this is where his tenure as a cartoon character began, and if we assume these cartoons are the very same that were shown in our real life, his sexuality was still hidden. But we also know that this very comic is awaiting to reveal his true colors, creating this kind of bizarre but also comforting cyclical story that Snagglepuss's true nature will always be revealed, no matter how willingly people want to turn a blind eye. This goes hand in hand with the fact that Snagglepuss was blacklisted in the first place because he refused to hide who he was. He knew, in his own words, that one could outrun who they are and their nature as easily as their own shadow. And the blunt recognition of that futility is what makes him so endearing and easy to root for in this context. As grim a story as Exit Stage Left is, I find it fills me with hope. It's all about how difficult life was for a gay artist in the 50s, yet looking at the Snagglepuss of the 50s compared to the character as we know him today in this very adaptation, it shows how far we've come. It'd be foolhardy not to say we still have a long way to go, but I think small victories are just as worthwhile, and the heartbreaking tale of Snagglepuss provoked more thought in me than anything with the Hanna-Barbera company's name on it ever has. I highly suggest you check it out. Don't hesitate to exit Stage Left to your nearest bookstore.